Welcome everybody to the current module 9 for TestNG framework. Till now we have studied about Java, object-oriented programming, reading Excel files, collections framework, right? And in the last module I talked about JUnit 4 framework. Okay, now current module is for TestNG. TestNG and JUnit one or less, they do the same thing, but TestNG is more famous in the market. Okay, so giving you a brief background about what we will be doing in this module, we'll be seeing about introduction to TestNG, how do you build test cases with TestNG, right? How do you build the annotations and all, skipping the test cases, batch running the tests, generating some reports, okay, and running it with Ant and all with build.xml, generating XSLT reports. So you'll actually learn a lot of things over here. Fine, giving you a brief background about what TestNG is and what it does. TestNG is basically something which helps you to build the test cases. Okay, right. Look, what happens is that when you are running Selenium scripts, okay, suppose these are my Selenium scripts. Okay, you have a requirement that at times you want to run them in batch, one after another, all the test cases. So again, TestNG is used over here for batch execution. Also for optional execution. What do you mean by optional execution? Fine, you want to run a test case and skip one of them. Okay, you don't want to run few test cases and you want to run few test cases. Right, now Selenium WebDriver will not give you these features. WebDriver is a tool which only helps you to interact with the browser. It will not generate reports, build the test cases, batch run and all those things. For that you need TestNG. For example, when you run the test cases, you would want that your data should be read from an external file like XLS, XML or a properties file. We saw how to read these files in module 7, right? Okay, now if you want to read the data from these files into the test cases, you need a certain mechanism, or you want to generate reports, good reports with the screenshots of errors and all of the pages inside the reports. Along with that, you want that logs should also be generated when you run the tests, because if you are running 500 tests for say 10 hours, you need to know what happened at each and every second. Right, so you need to have logs inside the reports. Okay, something like this. If I show you something like this, that is, this is one of the extent reports we are having. This is the test case and these are the logs of the test cases. Right, and you have the screenshot of the report, of the error and all, everything inside the logs. At each and every moment, everything is explained clearly that what has happened. This is for a mobile application test case which I was running. Right, so how do you do all these things? To do all these things, you need a centralized controller in between. This centralized controller is the TestNG framework, or at times it is also known as or at times we also use something known as JUnit, or we also use BDD, Cucumber and all everything. Look, TestNG, what it does is that, right, it is similar to JUnit, but it's got very better features. Okay, all these frameworks rather, they read the data from the properties file, they call the test cases correspondingly. Okay, and they help you to generate the reports and generate screenshots with logs and all everything in the reports. So these act like centralized controllers. Selenium will only be in this part, in the blue box. Selenium will never help you to generate reports or read files and all. Selenium will only help you to actually interact with the browser. So that is why learning one of these is very important. In the last module I talked about TestNG, now sorry, JUnit, and I'll talk about TestNG now. TestNG has got various advanced features as compared to JUnit. Better reporting is there. Okay, better support for parallel execution of the test cases is there. Fine, so let us start with it. Okay, the first thing which we will be talking about is how do you install TestNG in Eclipse. Okay, TestNG is installed as a plugin inside Eclipse. Fine. For that, all you need to do is that just go to Google and type testng Eclipse. Fine. What you'll get is you'll get a tutorial. The first one, this is the official website of testng, and they have got very good documentation about testng over here. Right. Go to the link over here, install the plugin, click on this link and scroll down. Fine. You will have the option over here, install from update site. Fine. Basically you need to copy this URL. Okay, copy this URL and open Eclipse. Go to help, install new software. Alright, and you'll see a window like this. Paste the URL over here in work with section and hit the enter button of the keyboard. Don't forget to hit the enter button of the keyboard and you will see testng coming up over here. Make sure you are connected to the internet. Fine. Click on next, 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 and testng will be installed as a plugin. You just need to click on next and install it. Maybe you get a temporary error in between, but ignore that error. Okay. And your Eclipse will also restart. In the process, your Eclipse will also restart, and once it's restarted, you can verify whether testng has installed or not by going to Window, Show View, and you can go to Other. Over here under Java out here, you will see testng. Alright, if you don't see it, then that means testng has not been installed as a plugin. Right. Secondly, if you are facing any issue in installation, please use Eclipse Luna. Please use Eclipse Luna. You can go to Google, type download Eclipse Luna, and you will get the download link. Fine. Okay. Now let's move forward and study the features of testng. That what testng offers. Fine. Let's study about the annotations in testng first. Okay. What I'll do is that I'll make a new Java project and I will call it testng tutorial. This is module 9 of the training. Fine. Okay. Now, what is testng and how do you build test cases with testng? Right. And right. So if you go to the source folder and if you create a new package over here, I'll name my package as test cases. Package is a folder inside folder. Fine. Now suppose I make a new test over here, a new class known as, say, application test.java. Okay, it is not necessary to have the test word in the file, but just like that I'm keeping. Okay, now if you talk about a normal Java program which we have been making till now, every Java program which we have made was having a main function. Okay, that main function was made in such a way that when you run the program, the control comes inside the main function for the first time. But in case of testng, we don't have a main function. For example, in the earlier modules which we had studied, okay, we used to make programs, fine, out here which had the public static void main function. Okay, but in testng there is no main function. In testng there are something known as annotations. Right? An annotation is built like this. For example, this is a test annotation. Say public void do login. Now, this test annotation means that this function is a test case. Alright, there will be an error over it. You move the mouse over error and you can add the testng library and again move the mouse and import the test annotation. Make sure that you don't add the JUnit library by mistake. Make sure you import the test annotation from the package org.testng.annotations. Right. So now this function becomes a test case. If I just give a dry run to this file, you can right click on this file and select the option run as testng test. What will happen is that this will run and you will get an output like this, that total test runs are 1, failures are 0, skips are 0. Okay, you get a proper output in console. You also have another tab known as results of running the class. If you open this tab, you will have the options over here, like you'll have the diagrammatic representation of the test case. Do login test case, it is passing. Along with that, if you refresh the project, you will have a test output folder generated automatically. Inside it, you will have the default test-ng reports present. If you open this index.html, fine, this is index.html. If you open it, you will have these default test-ng reports. Okay, not very impressive reports. Okay, we'll see how to generate better XSLT extent reports and all. Like if you talk about XSLT reports, then this is the sample XSLT report. Okay, it's got a pie chart and a representation and all, everything. We'll see that. All right, fine. Now, the other reports which I had shown you were extent reports. We'll also see these kinds of reports. Okay, but the default report which is generated is under the test output folder. Okay, now inside this function, you can have the WebDriver code, the Selenium WebDriver code written. Okay, I can just type over here that logging test execution. If I run it, you can run it from the top as well. Okay, you can simply run it and you will get the output over here, login test execution. So this function gets executed, right? You can have multiple functions, like I can have another function @test, public void. You can write do password change. So what will happen is that inside this function you can write changing password. Okay, you can have another test function like public void logout. So you can just type inside it logging out. So you can have multiple test functions inside a single Java file. Okay, and you can right click on the file and you can select run as test-ng test, or you can directly run it from the top as well. Right, you will get the output, that is total test runs are 3, failures are 0. If you look at this tab, fine, you will have the 3 tests mentioned. Okay, and if you refresh your project, you'll have the test output folder in which the reports will also come up. That is these reports with every test mentioned individually. Okay, right, fine. Now the thing is, we are lucky enough that the test cases are executing in a serial order. Generally they don't. Okay, the test cases, they are executed in the order that is alphabetic order. All right. For example, if I would had written simple, say login test, password change test, and logout test. Okay, if I execute them now, if I have changed the name of the functions, if I execute them now, you will see that in the output, hold on, it is written total test runs. Hold on, I'll just right click and run as test-ng test. Hold on, yeah, there was some issue. It's okay. It's written total test runs are 3, and if you look at the output, it is written login test, then logging out, and then changing password. Look, the order of execution is not the same in this case. Right, first login test is executed, then log out, and then password change. Actually, it's executed in the alphabetic order. Don't expect that the test cases will execute from top to bottom in this file. No, they won't execute like this. Alright, so you have to apply a strategy that you have to prioritize the test cases. Okay, you have to set a property known as the priority. You'll have to write priority equals to 1, and then out here priority equals to 2, priority equals to 3. You'll have to set the priorities of the test cases, one being the highest priority test case. So when you run this code, you will get an output that login test, changing password and logging out. Okay, so you will get all the 3 test cases getting executed in the serial order. Fine. So giving you a brief background of what I have done, I have made a single file and I have built 3 test cases inside it with the annotation @test. Okay, @test annotation symbolizes that this is a test case and I have prioritized the test cases as well. Fine. Now there are many other annotations as well in TestNG. Right, I'll talk about them. For example, there is an annotation known as @before test. Okay, so you write over here public void before test, and you can just print before executing test case. Okay, right, and there is an annotation known as after test. As the name suggests, they will run before and after running the test cases. Okay, I'll show you. Right, after executing test case. So you can import this. Make sure all your imports are from org.testng.annotations package. Okay, fine. Don't import from JUnit. So when you, because JUnit also has also got similar kind of annotations. Alright, so when you run it, you will actually see that total test runs are 3, and before executing test case is written in the beginning and after executing test case is written in the end. So the before and after test annotations make sure that the functions are executed before and after executing all the test cases. The position doesn't matter. I can put it over here or I can put it over here in the end as well. Right. Now talking about what is the use of before test, after test, there are few things which you want to initialize before executing all the test cases. For example, you want to open the browser in Selenium before starting the test execution, all the 3 test execution. And in after test function, you can actually close the browser. So all the 3 tests can execute serially on the same browser. I'm just taking a scenario with you to make you help understand it very clearly. That when before test you can open the browser, in test you can execute, in after test you can close the browser. Similar to before test and after test, there are more annotations like before method. If you just type @be, right, and hit the control spacebar of your keyboard, you will get all the annotations over here coming up. Okay, before method is another important annotation. Okay, you can write over here public void before method, right, and inside it you can simply print like this before method. Now what does this do? Okay, hold on, I'll tell you. And similarly you have got after method as well. You can import this one as well and type after method out here. Now what will these 2 annotations they do? Right, what is the difference between before test and before method? When I run the program, you will automatically understand. If I show you the output, before method and after method, they are executed before and after executing every test. Okay, before test and after test are executed once in the beginning and once in the end. But before method and after method are executed before and after executing every test. We will be using these a lot, before method, after method, because when we jump over to the modules for grid, okay, when you study Selenium grid, later on when how to implement the parallel running in grid and all, okay, in the frameworks as well. So you will require in grid, there is a special requirement, and that is when we are running grid, we have got a hub and nodes associated with the hub. Okay, now when you are running the test cases on the nodes, the hub, what it does is that it controls the nodes, right? Hub has got say 100 test cases which have to be executed parallelly. So what hub will do, it will suppose execute one over here, one over here, one over here, one over here, and one over here. 5 test cases will be executing. So hub will wait that after the test execution is finished on any one of the nodes, it will assign the 6th test case to that particular node. For a test case to be completed on a particular node, right, the browser should be closed after completion. This is mandatory. In grid, if you are executing a test case on a browser in particular node, suppose I am executing my test case on this particular node on the browser Mozilla. When my test case is over, I need to make sure that I close my browser. I quit the session. Then only hub will come to know and hub will send the next test case on this node. Otherwise you will get stuck. So in grid it is mandatory to close the browser after the test case has executed. So after the test case has executed, whether it has passed, whether it has failed, okay, it doesn't matter. I'll tell you how to fail the test cases and all as well. But you want to close the browser after every test execution. So in the after method function, we actually quit the browser in case of grid. So this will be used a lot in the coming modules. Alright, fine. Although we will be using after test and before test as well. Okay, but before method and after method are more important. Okay, now there are many other annotations as well. For example, there is an annotation known as @before suite. Hold on, I'll tell you about this in detail. I will just print out here before suite. We always have got test suites. Under one test suite, you have got multiple test cases. Fine. Okay, look, what do you mean by multiple test cases? I just have got one Java file over here. Inside it, I have built 3 test cases. I can build multiple Java files in my program having multiple test cases. And I can put all those test cases under one test suite and I can run them in batch. You got my point, right? I have this Java file. I can have more Java files. Every Java file will have many test functions inside it. And all these Java files I'll put under one test suite. So when I'm executing the test suite, that is I'm executing the tests in batch, before starting all the test cases, if you want to do something, then that will happen in before suite, or if you want to do some after executing the test suite, then you will have after suite. I will give you a better example for this. Okay, let me execute more test cases, build more files, and then when I will come over to the topic over here, just a minute, how to batch run the tests, I'll show you this annotation in a better way. Right now, if I just run it, you will see that it presents an output like this, that before executing, before the suite, and in the end, just a minute, it's not coming up. After suite is, okay, just a minute. After executing test case, and yes, after suite is written in the end. You see that? Even after writing that total test runs are 3 and all that stuff, in the end, when everything is going to end, the after suite function is called. Okay, so we will see these things in detail, but these are the annotations. Okay, And apart from this, there are many other annotations. We will be talking about them. For example, there is an annotation for data provider and all. Okay, if you want to check out what are the total number of annotations in TestNG, you can right click over here. You can go to new and you can select other over here, and you will see the option in this menu. You will see the option of TestNG. You can select TestNG class from this. Click on next. Look, these are all the annotations in TestNG. Majorly, which one we use? Okay, majorly we use before test, before suite, after test, after suite, and before method, after method, and data provider as well. This is also important. Before class, after class, they aren't used that much, but data provider, okay, I'll talk about data provider in some time. It helps you to parameterize the test cases. Fine. Let us look at the concept now for how to skip the test case. If you don't want to execute a test, sometimes when you are batch running, okay, which I will talk about in some time, how to batch run the test cases, right out here, you want to skip the test cases as well. Fine. Now, how do you skip the test case? To skip a test case, all you need to know, write is that you need to write a line, throw new skip exception, and you can specify any reason for skipping the test. Okay, now we have to just throw a skip exception deliberately. When we work with frameworks, when we have got many test cases with us, and what we do is that we keep the information in the Excel file, that which test case has to be executed and which test case has to be skipped. So the test, what it does is that it reads from the Excel file and it throws a skip exception if that test has to be skipped. I'll talk about that later on, but understand the fact that you can just throw a skip exception, and when you run this code, you will see that in the results, the login test would have the yellow mark, that is, it is skipped. Okay, along with it, if you look at the output, total test runs are there and skips are 1. So you can skip a test case by writing this line. Fine. But if you think about it carefully, if the login test is skipping, then obviously my other tests which are dependent on login test, that is password change and logout, they should not be executed. In the output, I am seeing the option that both of them are passing, but both of them should also be skipped if the login test has skipped. Okay, for that you will have to introduce dependencies. You'll have to write over here that password change test has got priority 2 and it depends on methods. You can specify the method login test like this in the array, that this test is dependent on login test. So when you run this, you will see that the password change test has also been skipped. Okay, and similarly you can put the same thing on the logout test as well, that logout is also dependent on login test. If I may want to make logout dependent on password change test as well, you can put a comma and you can put the password change test also over here, though it is not a correct thing, right? Whether the password changes or not, you should be able to log out. But if you want to make one test case dependent on multiple tests, you can write like this. So when you run this now, all the 3 tests would be skipped. Okay, right. If the login test is not skipped, then all the 3 tests will get executed successfully, and every time in the test output folder you will have the HTML reports. Okay, right. So this is about making test cases with the test annotations, skipping them, introducing dependencies, introducing priorities, and about the various test annotation functions we have. Okay, right. Now let me talk about assertions. Okay, how do you report the errors? I will come over to batch running. I'm just keeping it on hold for a while. Okay, now how do you manage assertions? How do you report errors? How do you report failures? Okay, now suppose I make a new class over here. Fine, and I'll call it a test like registration test. I want to register on the website or something, and this is my registration test. Okay, and I make the annotation @test public void do register test. Now suppose in this I am actually hold on, let me import it first. Make sure you import the testng test annotation. Okay, now in this test you would want to validate few things. Okay, for example, you have a title of the page. Okay, you have the expected title as some title, right? And the expected value would always be read from an Excel file. Okay, as we discussed in the module 7. The actual title you can get with the help of Selenium driver.getTitle command. And you would want to compare the expected and the actual title. That's what the testing is, right? You compare an expected and an actual value. And if they are not equal, you have to report an error. Okay, so the actual title is suppose something else. And if both of them are not matching, right, you have to report an error. So for that we use assertions. You can write over here assert equals. Okay, right. Make sure that assertion is the assert class is from the testng package again. Sometimes you can get it from JUnit. Right. You compare the actual and the expected value. You put the actual title first. The actual value has to be kept first, and expected has to be kept later on. So when you run this test, you will see that the result would be showing an error, that the registration test has an error, and you will have expected was this, but actually we found this. If you refresh the test output folder in which the reports are generated and open up index.html, then you will have an error over here. Now this is not a very good report, and I never use these. Okay, we'll talk about generating better reports. Okay, so you write assert equal function. This function compares both the values, and if they are equal, it will pass the test case. If in this case they are equal, the test is passing. Fine. Now there is one more assertion function. Okay, there is one more assertion function, that is assert true. Now what is this assert true? What does it do? It requires a certain condition over here and a certain message with that condition. A condition like say 2 greater than 1, and this message has to be the error message. I'll talk about it in detail, just be with me, don't get confused about this assertion. Now what does this mean? Assert true means that the condition which you have given over here should always evaluate to true in order to pass the test case. If you want this assertion to pass, this should always be true. 2 greater than 1 is true. So when you run this test, you will see that the test has passed. There are no failures. Okay, fine. But if I write 2 greater than 11, which is false, so this assertion will fail and this error message would be thrown. So when you run this code, you will see that an error message is thrown over here. Okay, right, as error message expected true but found false. Right, now out here, okay, let me comment this. when will we be using this kind of assertion? Remember earlier we had studied a function to detect the presence of the element. That function in the modules was, or in Selenium also we'll cover, a function like is element present. You pass over the XPath or the ID of the element. Okay, right. So this function will return you true or false. True if the element is present. Sorry. False if the element is not present on the page. And if it is returning you false, you can throw the error message that element not found. So this is the advantage. Okay, that is, you can check the presence of certain element on the web page, and if the element is not found, you can throw an error that find this particular link or button was not found on the web page. So we will talk about in detail, just be with me. Fine. So now, the most important part about assertion is that if I am putting up an assertion in the code, right, and if I type over here system.out.println A, and if I type system.out.println B, and if I run this program, and if assertion fails, if it passes, then A and B both will be printed. But if the assertion is failing, that is the actual and expected titles, they don't match, what will happen is that the control will stop on A and you will get an assertion error. So the program will stop in between on this particular line, the test will fail and it will stop. Well, at times you don't want it to stop, because suppose you are on a web page and you are doing a testing. If certain button is not present on the page on which you want to click, if you want to click on a button and the button is not present, and if your assertion fails, right, okay, you would want that the execution should stop and a failure should be reported. Okay, right. But there are situations in which you want to continue because maybe the title of the page doesn't match. Okay, it's not a very serious error. Okay, it's not an error which is related to the functional part. The functional part is still same on the website. It's working correct. Right. So there are two types of assertions. That means one is a situation which is critical. If a situation is critical, then you would want to stop the execution and report a failure as well. But there is a situation which is not critical. In this situation, you want that the failure should be reported, but you want to continue with execution. So in this situation, right, what we do is that we use assertions. We use the assert class. Okay, and in this situation, we have a class known as soft assert in testng. We use that soft assertions. Okay, right. So in the next part, right, that is if you go to hold on, if you go to testng part 2, okay, you will have we will continue with the soft assertions. All right.